Welcome back to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
This time, we're diving into Nyrond.
Oh, Nyrond.
In the world of Greyhawk setting,
Yeah.
looks like someone's getting ready for a Greyhawk campaign.
It seems that way. We've got source books, maps, notes.
And lots of them.
All Nyrond, all the time.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
And a challenging one, it promises to be. You know what's really fascinating is how Nyrond's situation after the Greyhawk Wars kind of mirrors Furyondy's in a way.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Both are struggling, but their paths diverge dramatically. It's like looking in a mirror, but the reflection is twisted.
Okay, so let's set the stage here for our listeners. Imagine a kingdom known for its art, its culture, its military.
A shining jewel.
Now, picture it completely battered and drained, disillusioned.
A fallen star.
That's Nyrond.
That's Nyrond after the Greyhawk Wars.
Yeah.
And what makes it even more interesting is that, while Furyondy has that single clear enemy, everyone knows who they're fighting. Nyrond is practically drowning in adversaries. It's like they're surrounded on all sides.
Yeah.
You've got Issues to the northwest. You've got Stonefist up north. The Bone March is just gnawing at their eastern borders.
Oh, yeah.
And then you've got that chaotic mess of Ulmor to the south. So it really makes for a very different kind of campaign, one where threats can just pop up from anywhere.
And to make matters even worse, Furyondy's got some powerful friends, right?
Absolutely.
The High Folk, Voluna, even Greyhawk itself.
A strong network of allies.
But Nyrond, well, their only reliable ally is the Ernst States.
And they're geographically limited in how much support they can offer.
Exactly. It's like they're on an island.
It really is. And that creates this feeling of desperation, this sense that Nyrond is truly on its own.
Yeah, and I think that's something that could really appeal to a lot of 5th edition players.
Absolutely. That gritty, survival-focused gameplay.
Yeah, where the stakes are high.
Where every decision matters.
Because there's no guarantee that some powerful kingdom's going to swoop in and save the day.
You're on your own. You have to get your hands dirty, make those tough choices, maybe even forge alliances with some unsavory characters just to survive.
Yeah, and speaking of difficult choices, let's talk about some of Nyrond's internal struggles.
Oh, Nyrond's internal struggles.
Yeah, because it's not just the external threats that they have to worry about, is it?
Not at all. It's like a termite nest that's been kicked over. Everything's falling apart from the inside.
The source material really paints a picture of a kingdom that's tearing itself apart.
Absolutely. It's like a ship in a storm with its sails ripped and the rudder broken.
Okay, so we've got King Archbold. Once a symbol of strength, right?
The once and future king.
But now he's seen as kind of a broken man.
Yeah, he just can't seem to rally his people or inspire confidence anymore. And that perceived weakness, well, it's led to this widespread noble rebellion.
So it's not just a war against external enemies, it's a war against their own leadership.
Precisely. They're hoarding their wealth, they're refusing to pay taxes, and some are even in open defiance of the crown. It's like every noble is trying to grab whatever they can before the whole thing sinks.
So what does that do to the kingdom? I mean, what are the consequences of all this?
Oh, it's devastating. I mean, with tax revenue drying up, Nyrond's economy has basically ground to a halt.
Makes sense.
Trade is disrupted, merchants are fleeing, and the common folk, well, they're left to fend for themselves.
Yeah, and that creates a really unique challenge for players, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Do they try to prop up this failing system, or do they exploit the chaos for their own gain? It's a real moral test.
And it makes the world so much more dynamic. If they decide to support the rebels, they're going to have to navigate this complex web of alliances and betrayals.
A tangled web indeed.
If they try to support the king, well, they're fighting an uphill battle against this tide of resentment and despair.
And there are no easy answers, which is what makes Nyrond such a compelling setting for a campaign.
The source books go into some detail about specific locations that really bring all of this to life. So let's start with one. Woodwitch.
Oh, Woodwitch, a classic example of how power corrupts in times of chaos.
All right, so what's going on in Woodwitch?
Well, Woodwitch is ruled by this militia leader named Bastrain.
Bastrain.
Yeah, and he is a textbook example of a warlord, a kind that exploits people's fear just to justify his own power grab.
Yeah.
He claims to be protecting Woodwitch, but he's really just lining his own pockets and terrorizing anyone who dares to question his authority.
So he's basically using the war as an excuse to become a dictator.
Exactly. Harsh taxes, crackdown on dissent, even a cult of personality built around him.
Yeah.
For players, Woodwitch offers this chance to fight against tyranny, to stand up for the common people against a ruthless oppressor. Classic hero stuff.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's some moral ambiguity there as well, right?
Oh, always. What if Bastrain, for all his faults, is actually pretty effective at keeping the Bone March at bay?
Yeah,
Do the players try to remove him?
potentially weakening Woodwitch's defenses.
Exactly. Or do they find some way to work with him, hold their noses at his methods, but recognize that, hey, maybe they need his strength? Tough call.
It's a decision that could have major repercussions for the entire region.
Oh, absolutely. And then you've got B2, which presents a different kind of leadership challenge, the challenge of inaction.
Okay, so what's going on in B2?
B2 is ruled by Count Barrowman.
Count Behrman.
He's described as weak and ineffectual, more concerned with his own comforts than with the suffering of his people, and his inaction. Well, it's created this breeding ground for crime and unrest. Even his own militia is deserting in droves.
Sounds like a mess.
Oh, it is. It's a fantastic setting for a campaign that focuses on investigation and social intrigue.
Yeah, I could see that.
Your players could be tasked with uncovering a conspiracy, exposing corruption within the Count's court, maybe even trying to inspire a popular uprising to replace the Count with a more capable leader.
So it's not always about fighting monsters?
Yeah.
Sometimes the real monsters are the people in charge.
That's a very good point. And sometimes the greatest challenge isn't defeating an enemy, but inspiring hope in a population that's lost faith in its leaders.
And I think that's a challenge that can really resonate with players today.
Absolutely. We see it all around us, don't we?
Let's move on to Uldred then, another interesting spot. Here we see an example of some effective leadership.
Uldred, a glimmer of light in the darkness.
Even amidst all of Nyrond's dysfunction.
It's a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who stand strong.
So who's in charge in Uldred?
Uldred is ruled by Duke Corinflas,
Duke Corinflas.
a cunning and capable leader. He's defied the king's unreasonable demands, diverted tax revenue to bolster local defenses, and openly criticized the king's mismanagement of the navy. He's a symbol of defiance.
He sounds like a rebel with a cause.
You could say that, but he's not just fighting for the sake of rebellion. He's fighting for the survival of his people, for the preservation of Nyrond's culture and values.
So he represents a potential alternative to Archbold's failing leadership.
He does. He represents a path that Nyrond could take if it can find the strength to change.
And that sets up a really fascinating dynamic for players.
It does, doesn't it?
Do they support Corinflas's rebellion, potentially pushing Nyrond into a civil war?
Or do they try to find a way to reconcile him with the king, hoping to unify the kingdom against those external threats?
Again, no easy answer.
No easy answers at all. And it really highlights a crucial element of the Greyhawk setting, the importance of individual choices. In Nyrond, the fate of the kingdom isn't predetermined. It's shaped by the actions of its people, from the king on his throne to the adventurers exploring its darkest corners. Your players have the power to make a difference, to change the course of history. And that's a powerful feeling.
I'm really liking this Corinflas character.
He's definitely a standout, a strong leader in a time of turmoil.
The source material also mentions this group called the Sagacious Society.
Ah, the Sagacious Society. A fascinating group.
They seem to operate in the shadows, but their influence is felt all over Nyrond.
It's like they have their fingers in every pie, whispering in the ears of kings and queens, pulling strings behind the scenes.
Who are they?
Well, they're a secret society. Scholars, mages, historians dedicated to preserving knowledge, but also to influencing the political landscape.
Really?
Oh, yes. They believe knowledge is power. And they use it to manipulate events, sometimes for good, sometimes. Well, let's just say their motives aren't always clear.
Sounds like a combination of a think tank and a spy network. What a fantastic resource for players.
Absolutely. They could be quest givers, offering information, resources, even magical assistance in exchange for favors.
Right.
But they could also be rivals, competing with the players for influence or even manipulating them for their own ends.
I love that.
It's a layer of intrigue, a constant question mark hanging over everything. Who are they really working for? What are their true goals?
Yeah, it really adds this element of uncertainty. You never know who to trust.
And that makes for a much more engaging and exciting campaign.
Absolutely.
And it raises some interesting questions for the players themselves. How far are they willing to go to achieve their goals? Will they compromise their morals to work with a group like the Sagacious Society?
That's a tough one.
It is, isn't it? It's a choice that could have some serious consequences for their characters and for the world around them.
I like it.
It's all about those choices.
It really is. Choices and consequences. That's what makes a good story.
Absolutely.
On Nyrond.
Well, Nyrond's full of them.
Yeah. Plenty of choices to be made.
And even more consequences waiting to unfold. With all this political intrigue and social upheaval, it really makes you wonder what's happening with the faiths of Nyrond.
That's a great point.
A kingdom in crisis, they often turn to religion for answers for comfort. So how are the different priesthoods responding to this?
Yeah, are they offering solace? Are they adding fuel to the fire?
Exactly. And thankfully, the source material doesn't shy away from this.
No, it doesn't.
In fact, the different deities' reactions to Nyrond's decline. It's like a goldmine for dungeon masters.
Yeah, you could really build some compelling narratives around this.
Absolutely. It's not just a backdrop. It's a source of conflict alliances, even potential quest hooks.
I like it.
For example, you've got followers of Rao.
The god of peace and reason.
Exactly. And they're actively promoting diplomacy and understanding. They see Nyrond's salvation not in military might, but in healing those divides that have crippled the kingdom.
It's a different approach.
It is. For players, this might mean encountering Raoan priests mediating between these feuding nobles, or organizing relief efforts for refugees, maybe even trying to broker a peace treaty with the Bone March. It's like flipping the script on typical adventuring.
Yeah, instead of just going in and fighting monsters, you're trying to make peace.
Exactly. Make peacemaking a central goal.
That's really cool.
It's a nice change of pace. It challenges that assumption that every D&D campaign has to be about dungeon delving and fighting monsters.
Yeah, it does.
But of course, not everyone's on board with this pacifist approach. The Church of St. Cuthbert, for example, has adopted a much more militant stance.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They see Nyrond's survival hinging on military strength and unwavering faith.
So they're more like Furyondy in a way, focused on defense against LUs.
In a way, yes. And for players, this could mean joining a Cuthbertine order that patrols the borders, rooting out corruption within the ranks, battling those fiendish infiltrators that are trying to exploit the kingdom's weakness.
It's that classic holy warrior archetype, but with all the added nuance of Nyrond's internal struggles.
Exactly.
I like it. Now, even within a group like the Church of St. Cuthbert, there's got to be potential for conflict.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, are they loyal to the king even as he falters? Or are they more concerned with protecting Nyrond regardless of who sits on the throne? Tough questions.
Tough questions indeed. And don't forget the economic angle.
Oh, the economic angle.
You've got the priests of Zilkas.
The god of trade and commerce.
Yeah. And they are outraged by Nyrond's economic collapse. They see it as a direct result of the king's incompetence and the nobles' greed.
They do.
They're kind of the voice of the common people in a way.
They are, demanding accountability and a return to prosperity. And this could lead your players into some really interesting scenarios.
Like what?
Maybe they uncover a Zilkas-backed plot to expose corrupt officials. Or they're hired to protect a caravan of merchants who are trying to reestablish those trade routes. It's a chance to really explore the economic realities of the setting and how they impact everyday life.
Yeah. So you've got all these different factions. The Raoans preaching peace. You've got the Cuthbertians preparing for war. You've got the Zilchans trying to rebuild a shattered economy.
A recipe for conflict.
It is.
Yeah.
But also for some really interesting alliances.
Oh, imagine a group of Cuthbertian knights teaming up with Zilchan merchants to protect a Raoan peace delegation.
That's awesome.
The possibilities are endless.
It's not just about good versus evil. It's about these competing visions for the future of the kingdom.
And your players, as outsiders, they have the potential to either exacerbate these conflicts or help bridge the divides.
So it all comes down to the choices they make.
Choices and consequences, always.
We've talked a lot about the big picture. The political turmoil, the economic collapse, the religious tension.
The macro view.
But how can a dungeon master actually bring all of this to life in their campaign?
That's the question, isn't it? And the source material actually provides a wealth of specific locations and characters that can be used to create truly memorable encounters.
So it's not just about abstract concepts. There's concrete stuff to work with.
Oh, absolutely. And it's that level of detail that can really elevate a campaign. Let's start with Uldred.
Okay, so we're back to Uldred.
It's more than just Duke Cornflass's seat of power. It's a microcosm of Nyrond's struggles.
In what way?
Well, you've got a disgruntled navy that's increasingly involved in smuggling.
Oh, wow.
You've got the common folk struggling to survive as the kingdom crumbles around them. And of course, you have Cornflass himself walking this tightrope between rebellion and loyalty.
Sounds like a setting ripe with intrigue and danger.
Oh, it is.
I'm trying to think of what kind of adventures could be set in Uldred.
Imagine your players arriving in Uldred. Maybe they're seeking their fortune. Maybe they're just looking for a safe haven from the chaos of the wider world.
Yeah.
And they quickly find themselves embroiled in the city's web of secrets and lies. Maybe they're hired by Cornflass to investigate that smuggling ring,
Okay.
only to discover that it involves members of his own court. Or perhaps they uncover a plot to assassinate the Duke orchestrated by agents loyal to the king.
Ooh, that's good.
The possibilities are endless. It's like a classic film noir.
Shadowy figures, double crosses, and everyone's got something to hide.
Exactly.
I love it.
It allows you, as the dungeon master, to explore those themes of loyalty betrayal.
The moral gray areas that often emerge in times of crisis.
Exactly. Your players might start out with these noble intentions, only to find themselves making compromises they never thought possible.
Speaking of moral compromises, let's talk about another location. Wamtham,
Oh, Wamtham.
in the Flinty Hills.
A city on the front lines.
This is a city that's really facing some heartbreaking challenges.
It's true. What's fascinating about Wamtham is how it embodies both Nyrond's resilience and its desperation. It's a vital trade hub home to the kingdom's mint, and a symbol of defiance against those humanoid hordes. But it's also buckling under the weight of its responsibilities.
Sounds so.
The influx of refugees has stretched its resources to the breaking point. There's not enough food, not enough housing, and the people, well, they're growing increasingly desperate.
So it's a city teetering on the edge of collapse.
It is. And the question is, what will your players do when they arrive? Will they try to help maintain order, knowing that their actions could have these unintended consequences? Or will they exploit the chaos for their own gain, preying on the weak and vulnerable?
Another tough choice.
Another tough choice. And let's not forget about that ever-present threat of the Bone March. Raids are becoming more frequent, and rumors are spreading of fiendish involvement. So your players could find themselves defending the city walls against a horde of gnolls, or venturing out into the hills to scout enemy movements, disrupt their supply lines. It's a chance to experience the grit and terror of frontier warfare.
Where survival is a daily struggle.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and delve into another location that is ripe with adventure. The Celadon Forest.
The Celadon Forest, a place of ancient trees and hidden glades.
It's a place where the needs of a struggling kingdom clash with the ideals of those who call it home.
And it's a perfect example of how you can weave those environmental themes into a Greyhawk campaign.
Okay, so what's going on in the Celadon Forest?
Well, the Celadon Forest is a source of natural wealth.
Yeah, timber and things like that.
Right. But King Archbold, he's desperate for resources. He's ordered the forest to be logged. That timber is going to fuel the war effort. And of course, this has sparked a fierce resistance from the woodsmen and the druids who call the forest home.
Classic conflict between civilization and nature.
It is. And it's ripe with potential for adventure. Imagine your players arriving in the Celadon Forest, maybe hired by a logging company to protect their operations from saboteurs. But as they spend time in the forest, they begin to understand the woodsman's perspective. They see the beauty of these ancient trees, the delicate balance of the ecosystem, and that deep spiritual connection that the locals have with the land. So do they follow their orders? Do they ensure the kingdom gets the resources it needs, even if it means destroying a pristine wilderness? Or do they side with the defenders of the forest, risking the wrath of the king and potentially weakening Nyrond's defenses?
Tough choice.
It's a tough choice. And it's a fantastic opportunity to introduce some of those environmental themes into the campaign. And it allows the players to interact with a diverse cast of characters. You've got hardened woodsmen, mystical druids, maybe even some fey creatures that dwell in the forest's deepest reaches. And don't forget about the potential for mystery. The Celadon Forest is ancient. It's full of forgotten ruins and hidden secrets.
Yeah, like what?
Well, maybe there's an elven city lost amongst the trees. Or a forgotten shrine to a nature deity. Your players could uncover ancient prophecies, encounter strange creatures, and maybe even stumble upon a source of powerful magic that could change the course of the war.
I like it.
It's all about bringing the setting to life.
So we talked about the political intrigue of Uldred, the desperation of Wamtham, the environmental conflict in the Celadon Forest. Each location offers something unique, a different set of challenges for players. And it really highlights just how diverse the Nyrond setting is.
And we've only scratched the surface.
You're right.
There are countless other locations and storylines just waiting to be discovered in Nyrond.
Yeah. Nyrond is a kingdom ripe with adventure, full of danger and opportunity in equal measure.
Absolutely, a land of contrasts and contradictions.
We've covered a lot of ground. You know, Nyrond's political turmoil, the economic collapse, the desperate fight for survival.
It's a kingdom hanging by a thread. barely holding on.
It is, but there's one element we haven't really touched on yet.
And what's that?
Magic.
Ah, magic, the lifeblood of so many D&D campaigns. And in Nyrond, it's more than just flinging spells in combat.
Yeah, the source material really hints at this. Magic is deeply intertwined with everyday life in Nyrond, even in these dark times.
It's woven into the fabric of their society. It's how they travel, how they communicate, how they even keep the kingdom running. Think about the lock complex at Curran, for instance.
Curran.
Yeah. They use these massive lodestones to regulate the flow of the river, make sure that trade can continue even with all these natural obstacles. It's a marvel of magical engineering.
So it's not just about wizards throwing fireballs. It's about how magic shapes the very fabric of society.
Exactly. And for dungeon masters, this opens up a whole world of possibilities.
Like what?
Imagine a rival nation sabotages those Karen locks.
Cripple Nyrond's economy.
Exactly. Or maybe there's some ancient prophecy that hinges on a specific alignment of the lodestones. Suddenly, this seemingly mundane piece of infrastructure becomes central to the campaign.
And it's not just Karen. The source material mentions Blazebane, this castle that's fortified with elemental fire magic.
Ah, yes. Blazebane, a fortress, forged in flame. Imagine the stories you could tell there. Is the magic failing, leaving the castle vulnerable? Or maybe someone's trying to corrupt that magic, turn it against the defenders.
It's like a classic siege scenario.
But with a magical twist. And this is where things get really exciting for players who love to delve into the intricacies of the 5th edition magic system.
Yeah, they could be tasked with deciphering ancient runes that power the castle's defenses. Or maybe they need to forge a pact with a fire elemental to restore the magic.
Exactly. It's not just about stat bonuses and pluses and minuses.
Right. It becomes a dynamic part of the story.
It does. But, of course, magic in Nyrond isn't always a force for good.
Right. There's a darker side as well.
There is. The source books hint at necromancers raising undead armies.
Oh, yeah.
Dark cults worshipping forgotten deities. Powerful artifacts that could shift the balance of power.
This is where Nyrond could really shine for a horror-themed campaign.
Oh, absolutely. Or for players who enjoy those morally gray choices.
Yeah, do they fight fire with fire?
Use necromancy to counter the Bone March.
Or do they hold fast to their principles, even if it means facing these overwhelming odds?
Tough choices.
They are, and it's a great way to introduce these ethical dilemmas without being preachy.
It is. It's not about telling players what's right or wrong.
It's about presenting them with these difficult choices and letting them grapple with the consequences.
Exactly.
So imagine a scenario where the only way to stop a rampaging undead horde is to use a cursed artifact.
A classic dilemma.
Do they risk corrupting themselves with dark magic to save innocent lives? Or do they stand by and watch as the kingdom falls?
It's a decision that could haunt them for the rest of their days.
And it ties back to that theme of desperation that pervades Nyrond.
It does. When your back's against the wall and all hope seems lost, are you willing to make a deal with the devil, so to speak?
And that's a question that can really resonate with players on a personal level.
Yeah.
But Nyrond isn't all doom and gloom, is it?
Not at all. Amidst all the darkness, there are those glimmers of hope.
Individuals and factions working to make things better, to restore Nyrond to his former glory.
We've already discussed Duke Cornflass and Prince Surent, each representing a different path for Nyrond's future. But there are countless others. Priests tending to the sick and wounded, merchants trying to rebuild those trade routes, scholars preserving knowledge, and of course the adventurers themselves, drawn to Nyrond's call for heroes.
It's that mix of hope and despair that makes Nyrond such a compelling setting.
It is.
It's a world where the stakes are high, the choices are difficult, and the actions of the players can truly make a difference.
It's a world where you can fight for a kingdom on the brink of collapse, where you can face down those monstrous threats and grapple with those moral dilemmas, and where you can ultimately leave your mark on a setting that's rich with history and brimming with potential.
So there you have it, Nyrond, a kingdom teetering on the brink of collapse, yet brimming with potential.
A land of contrasts and contradictions.
A place where the choices you make really matter.
Then where the fate of an entire kingdom might just rest on your shoulders.
I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Nyrond.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners,
may your adventures in Nyrond be filled with excitement,
intrigue,
and, of course, those critical hits.
Until next time, may your dice rolls be ever in your favor.